Team level, start looking at the organizational level, you can see something, and Steve likes to talk about the rework percentage. How much of your time is spent doing rework? And when we talk about total project quality, what we're really trying to do in many ways is buy down that rework percentage. That we don't want to discover things late, because one of the most common findings we have in software is that the longer a defect, the longer a mistake, and here, even in our course, we get a lot more technical about what a defect actually means. The longer of a defect sits in the system, typically, generally, it takes longer to find and more time and effort to fix once you do find it. But finding it is usually 90% of the problem. And this is where Agile has sort of said, you know what? If it was working and we do 2 weeks worth of work and it's broken, we know where to go look. We only did a couple of weeks worth of work. But if it's working and we do 6 months worth of work and then we discover it's broken, where do we start looking? There's tons of possibilities. So the looking time becomes expensive, as well as the fixing time becomes more expensive. So how do we keep that distance between defect insertion and defect detection as small as possible is one strategy that we tend to follow. And the other strategy is, can we get practices that insert less defects to begin with? Steve, we can spend time talking about natural language requirements as a way to insert tons of defects.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
of the inherent ambiguity in the nature. So is there a better way to do things like requirements that inserts less defects to begin with? So there's two strategies. Insert less. This is where you try to figure out, is there a better practice for what we're doing that inserts less? And then how do we find the ones that we did insert sooner so they cost less to find and fix?
Right. It's the defect prevention and early defect identification is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, that's what we do in the course. We start saying there's two things. There's defect prevention, which was classic quality assurance, not testing at the end, which was so. Just as a side note, one of the reasons why we call testing teams a QA team, even though they do no defect prevention, they just do defect detection. Why we call them QA is because when software became commercialized in the early 80s, that was the hip term. The term quality control meant you were old, you were a fogey, you were not with the program. Only people who were doing quality assurance were the rock stars. And so what do the people say who had anything to do with quality? Oh, we're going to be a QA. And yet, if you look at most people's QA team, they're doing no defect prevention. That is, they're not trying to find practices and improve practices that lowers the number of defects we're inserting. All they're doing is saying, hey, we're going to maybe oversee some reviews, which is defect detection. We're going to do testing, which is finding defects. Now, we could do that testing earlier. We could do that review early, so it's less time, but it's still detection. It's not prevention. Now, some people argue, well, a review midstream is preventing it from going downstream. It's like, no, I'm not going to accept that because I'd rather not insert it in the first place rather than insert it and find it.
Yeah, a good example of defect prevention would be to use templates and checklists that are basically reminders. Here are these things you better not forget, because if you do forget, they're going to turn out to be problems later.
Right.
And so you're in being reminded, you avoid the defect because you took care of it at the time you should have taken care of it.
Right. Or even classic examples.